Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. President-elect Donald Trump is wasting no time announcing his nominees for major positions in the government. The choice of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State was widely expected and was generally greeted with favorable comments from both sides of the aisle. Whether you agree with him or not, Rubio is considered a serious person when it comes to foreign policy. But then there are the more bizarre and many would argue dangerous picks. For instance, RFK Jr. for Health and Human Services Secretary. He's an anti-vax conspiracy theorist who has suggested vaccine research created the AIDS virus and that vaccines cause autism in children. It doesn't. Trump has also tapped Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. The former Congresswoman has spread Russian propaganda on Ukraine and Syria. And then you have Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Gaetz immediately resigned from Congress after his nomination Wednesday, hoping to head off the release of a House ethics report on Friday into allegations he engaged in drug-fueled sex parties with young, possibly underage girls. Now, as the nation prepares for a Trump presidency in which Republicans control both the House and the Senate, I spoke to Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz for his thoughts on Trump's picks and his win.
We have to go backwards. This is about the economy, stupid. I mean, that's the number one issue, and inflation. And even though the world was dealing with inflation and the U.S. was doing the best among the world, right, in people's everyday lives with groceries or rent or gas, that's how they felt. And they have a right to feel that way. We can't tell them how they should or shouldn't feel. But we have to come out with a message on what we offered, what Donald Trump offered. And Donald Trump, once again, out-communicated us. He did that in 2016. He did it again here.
What's the next 2 years going to look like in the House of Representatives?
Oh, good God. I mean, who knows? I mean, look, they were in the majority in the 118th. I thought the country might give Trump the wheel, but give him breaks by giving the Democrats Congress. But Trump's, vote was so big, winning the popular vote. Swept a lot of Democrats out in districts we should have won. But who knows? I mean, it's going to be a very tight majority. We'll see if they can't contain the chaos. But, I mean, look what's going on in his appointments right now. Donald Trump is appointing people like a guy who knows he's not on the ballot again, doesn't care about any consequences. And so the pressure he's going to put on these Republicans is going to be immense. This is what he told everybody. If you watch his rallies and you listen to his videos, this is what he said he was going to do. Maybe people weren't here listening to him or didn't take him seriously, but nothing is a surprise at the moment. He telegraphed all of it. And so it is going to be interesting, tough, problematic. Use whatever verb or adjective you want.
So how do you view your role going forward as a Democrat in this House, also knowing that the Senate is now in Republican control, the White House in Republican control? You probably can't expect a lot from the Supreme Court to provide those guardrails. How do you define your role now going forward? So give me a sense for what your job is going to be like.
Yeah, well, the good news in the Senate so far, John Thune says they're keeping the legislative filibuster. And so if that stands, that's a big deal. It's always why I supported the filibuster, even when some Democrats wanted to get rid of it. It's the only guardrail right now if one party, in this instance the Republicans, have the whole kit and caboodle. So we'll have to see how that goes. That's a big piece, I think, to what happens in the House. What will we do, Jim? What will I do? I'll do the same things I've always done. Where there are areas of agreement, broken clock can be right twice a day, I will work across the aisle. And where I think they are absolutely wrong or abusing their power, like I saw with James Comer trying to do a fake faux Biden impeachment, I will bring everything I can to effectuate that and shut it down. And so we're going to have to wait until January. It's tough to react to stuff that hasn't happened yet, but based on what we're seeing, they're clearly coming.
So you talk about appointments so far. As we're taping this late Thursday afternoon, and there are now reports that RFK Jr. is in line now to be named the head of Health and Human Services. Your reaction to that?
Well, do you mind if we cut this interview short and I run to CBS real quick?
Yeah.
I mean, look, by the way, the Trump transition head said that wouldn't happen. Okay. And now it's happened. Again, who knows? If we take the words of RFK Jr., I mean, nobody knows now what's going to happen in health in this country. Sure, there are things we can always improve, right? Yes, there are ingredients in our food that we could get out. But that is not what RFK has just talked about. He's talked about upending medicine in this country, upending vaccines in this country. It is just super unclear what he would do. And it is that unknown that should concern people. Again, I don't know if he can get confirmed, but I don't know that Donald Trump cares, because Donald Trump may not be going for confirmations. He may be going for recess appointments based on this whole list of people he's put forward. I mean, he's really telling the senators, good luck with your reelection, because he's going to make them take some really, really tough votes.
One of those nominations is for Attorney General Matt Gaetz. I know you know Matt. You've served with Matt. You have a good relationship with him. But do you think what is your reaction, though, to the notion of Matt Gaetz leading the Department of Justice?
Well, I mean, look, first, if I were in the Senate, I'd be voting against these nominations, including Matt. Okay. But what I said previously, I still stand by, which is, Donald Trump won the election. Elections have consequences. Why are we surprised that he's taking his most loyal, ardent defenders, and Matt Gaetz, most loyal, ardent defender, the guy that he turned to in Congress, a gifted debater, like his policies or don't like his policies, and he's putting him in the Department of Justice. Donald Trump said what he was going to do with the Department of Justice. He told everybody that. We're surprised at the vessel he picked. And so, elections have consequences. And, it's again, it just, who knows if Matt Gaetz were to get over to DOJ, what would go on over there?
We talk about Gaetz, we talk about RFK. Maybe one of the even more concerning is, for a lot of folks, is Tulsi Gabbard as head of Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah, and by the way, that's the one I'm most concerned about. Although that's like saying, well, what would I rather get, tuberculosis or polio? But I'm the most concerned about Tulsi. This is someone who went and had private meetings with Assad, who said, Putin's just misunderstood, and now she's going to have all of our intelligence. And so that one has not just repercussions in this country, that has repercussions around the world. And so it's tough to be like, this one's more concerning than the next. But that one was really shocking, I think, to the world system.
Do you get the sense that there is a potential here for Republicans to so dramatically overreach that it costs them some way? I've heard this discussion that what Democrats may be able to do is wait for Republicans to go that bridge too far. For some, it may be Matt Gaetz. For some, it may be Tulsi Gabbard.
But that's like saying, oh, if we only have more gun deaths in this country, maybe eventually we'll get good gun legislation, right? I mean, we're going to have to go through that to get there. And so, they're going to overreach because Donald is going to overreach, and he's not on the ballot again. All of these other people are going to be on the ballot. So he's going to overreach. That's going to happen. But the idea that we'll just let's just let it ride and then we'll capitalize in 2 years. That's the problem with this place, quite frankly, is that, it's not about what's good or bad. It's just about what's the next election and the next election and the next election.
Well, hasn't Donald Trump already started floating the idea that maybe he's entitled to another term?
Yeah, well, that's a good way to own the libs. But you can see, based on Donald Trump's appointments, he knows he's not on the ballot again. He knows he's not going to have to deal with this in the future. He's putting a lot of Republicans in tough spots, I think. But I'm not going to comment on every little thing that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. We get caught up in that. He is not running for re-election. He can't run for re-election. Let's move on from that topic.
Marco Rubio, I'm curious. I would expect that he's going to be able to be confirmed rather easily in the for as Secretary of State.
Marco already has Fetterman, a Democrat, saying he's going to vote for him. So Marco will get confirmed.
What does that look like in terms of Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, Latin America in particular. Do you think that for so often it seems as if Latin America has never really gotten the place it deserves in terms of foreign policy, whether it was by Democrats or Republicans in the White House? Does that change at all, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And look, obviously I have vast disagreements on certain policies with Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz as well, one of my colleagues, who's going to be the national security advisor. But those picks are very different than RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, right? Those are definitely more mainstream picks. I agree with Marco Rubio on Iran, on Latin America, on Russia. Same thing with Mike Waltz as well. But I do think it's a big deal that the Secretary of State's going to really understand Latin America, really understand Cuba. I think that'll be a plus for Marco as he's going through. But by the way, this group, I mean, this is not like there's some strategy here to create some team of rivals. I mean, the conversations and arguments that are going to go on between Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, and I don't know, the SecDef from Fox News. I mean, it's going to be significant because the gulf of how Marco looks at Iran and Russia versus how Tulsi looks at it is night and day. I'm
curious as to also your reaction to former Governor Mike Huckabee being the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Does that help in terms of trying to bring things to a close with regard to what's going on with Gaza and the rest, or is that likely to heighten the tensions even further?
So that's a good question, actually. I actually don't know the answer to that. I know Mike Huckabee is a big defender of Israel and has a record on that, but that actually was a pick that I did not even see coming. I didn't see that fitting the situation. I had heard many other names to be ambassador for Israel and not Mike Huckabee. So, look, obviously there's some past statements that Mike Huckabee has made, but I just don't know. Now, there will be areas that Mike Huckabee and I will work on together. I want to get Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords or a like agreement. I want to get the hostages out. I do want to bring the Gaza war to an end. I do want to make sure Israel has all the military weapons that they need. I do want to make sure that Israel has the flexibility to get Hamas off their border and to make sure that we have a tough policy against Iran. But we also have to see how Huckabee is going to conduct himself. There is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, right? We have to figure out how to deal with that. I blame Hamas for that, of course, but we do have to figure out how to deal with that situation.
When we come back, the chair of the Republican Party of Florida. Stay with us. Welcome back. Trump's victory in Florida shows once and for all that Florida is now a red state. Registered Republicans now outnumber Democrats by more than 1.1 million, and that number will likely grow in the months ahead. This week, I spoke to the chair of the Republican Party of Florida, Evan Power.
The country has been broken for 4 years. People were frustrated. The economy was not going well for them. You go to the grocery store, you see higher prices. People gave President Trump a landslide victory. Here in Florida, it was the largest victory since 1988 for a Republican candidate. And people are excited for change in D.C. and having Washington go to work for them rather than the establishment of D.C.
I want to talk about there's been news every single day in terms of the different appointments that President-elect Trump has made. I want to start with Marco Rubio. Your reaction to Marco Rubio being designated as Secretary of State, and then I want to ask you about who you think will replace him.
Senator Rubio is a great choice. He's been a longtime leader here in Florida, from the Florida House to our senator. He also comes from Miami-Dade and the exile community. His parents were exiles from Cuba, so he knows the important role that America plays in the world. And I'm excited to have him serving as our Secretary of State and somebody from Florida serving in that role.
The parlor game has already begun about who will replace Marco Rubio, who the governor will appoint to serve until a special election will be held in 2026. What's your thoughts right now as to who's on that list and who's likely to get it?
You know, I've heard a lot of different names. I've heard the governor may appoint himself. I hear Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, Attorney General Ashley Moody, or RNC co-chair Laura Lee Trump. And, all of them would be great choices. I think we have a lot of talent here in Florida, and I'm going to wait to see who the governor picks, but I know that we have a very deep talent pool, and I think any of them will work and go to work for Florida immediately.
Do you really think the governor will want to appoint himself, give up the governor's mansion right now? He's got 2 years left, pretty much with supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. He would be the powerhouse in Florida. Does he give that up to take over a Senate seat when he could just wait 2 years and run in a special election in 26?
Well, I have my doubts about that for those very reasons, but, anything can happen in these things, as we know. So I'm just going to wait to see what he decides to do. And I think we have a very deep talent pool that's ready to go to work for Florida, and we're excited about that.
Now, it's no secret that there has been tension between the Trump side of things and DeSantis, especially when they ran against each other. They seem to patch things up, but we didn't really see the governor out on the campaign trail for the now president-elect. I'm just sort of curious, do you think Laura Trump is really an option for Governor DeSantis to appoint? Would he really appoint the daughter-in-law of the incoming president?
Well, I think the media loves to speculate about the drama between the two of them, but I think they get along well now after the primary is over. And I don't think you needed to see the governor on the campaign trail because we won Florida by such a large margin. He didn't really have to do a lot in Florida because he's delivered it by his policies. But I think Laura Trump is obviously a name that's in the mix. And I don't think that any kind of personal animus would influence the governor's decision. He's going to pick the best person he thinks is ready to fight for Floridians. So I think all the names are on the table.
All right. Now, the controversial one for the recent designation is Attorney General. Naming Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. Do you honestly think Matt Gaetz is the right choice to be the United States Attorney General?
Well, we've all seen the lawfare that the Department of Justice has used against politicians from President Trump on down the line. And if there's anyone ready on day one to take on the deep state inside the Department of Justice, it is Matt Gaetz. He's a great lawyer, a great orator. I think he is ready and prepared to take on that deep state on day one in the Department of Justice.
You're not concerned by the allegations that have been around him for a long time? I mean, he essentially resigned from the House saying that it was because he now has this nomination. But in reality, he resigned because in 2 days, the House Ethics Committee was going to release a report that was likely to be fairly damaging to him when it came to those allegations surrounding sex trafficking and parties with minors and a litany of issues. Do you really think that someone with that cloud over their head should be the nation's top law enforcement officer?
Well, there was an investigation. He was cleared by the investigation. The FBI took the extraordinary step of saying he was no longer under investigation. And this is the kind of lawfare that has been used against politicians. I don't like rumor and innuendo. I think that the real reason he resigned is the reason that he said, which is to expedite the special elections so that we can get representation back in a narrowly controlled Republican chamber. But I think Matt Gaetz is prepared to take on that lawfare because he's been the recipient of some of that lawfare himself. And I think that he's ready to help take on the Department of Justice on day one.
You talk about a landslide popular vote victory for Donald Trump. By that standard, there was a landslide victory in Florida on Amendment 4 when it came to Floridians saying they think the 6-week abortion ban is too extreme. Now, I realize it didn't reach 60% to be able to qualify as a constitutional amendment, taking it to viability. But more than 57% of Floridians made their voices clear that the 6-week ban is too extreme. Should the Republican legislature respond to that and change the number of weeks, maybe move it back to 12 or 15?
No, I think that that's a misunderstanding of what happened on Election Day. You had dark money coming from out of state, confusing our voters, trying to get them to vote for unlimited abortions. So I don't think it's a referendum on any policy proposal other than it was a rejection of out-of-state dark money from influencing our legislation.
On Amendment 3, you and I have spoken about this before. You have two hats you basically wear. You're the RPOF chair, but you also lobby on behalf of the hemp industry. I'm curious, now that Amendment 3 to legalize marijuana in the state has failed, what do you think will happen to the hemp industry going forward? What do you expect will happen in this next legislative session?
Well, the hemp industry itself wants to be more highly regulated. They want to bring bad actors under control. And so I think that's the partnership that they've developed with the governor and with the legislature. There's going to be efforts to rein them in and to be able to bring in the bad actors. But I think we're going to continue to move forward on a legitimate policy on where we're going to go on marijuana and hemp and all of that moving forward. But what we saw was the people of Florida rejected another dark money operation that was to give advantages to certain companies and to allow people to smoke marijuana wherever they wanted, which people did not want, and prevented home grow. So all these things we can have conversations about, but that's what the legislative process is about. And so we're excited to have those conversations with the legislature.
You spoke both about Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, talking about dark money. The money that was used on the other side by the governor was taxpayer money. It was used, whether it was the Department of Transportation, Department of Children and Families, the Department of Health, the Agency for Healthcare Administration. I could go down the list of Florida Highway Patrol, all using taxpayer money to influence voters in this year's election when it came to Amendments 3 and Amendment 4. Also using state agencies to basically put out what Joe Gruder's, former chairman of the Republican Party of Florida, labeled as propaganda on those issues by the governor. Are you comfortable with the governor using state resources that way? It's certainly fine for the governor in his own capacity as governor to oppose an amendment, but to use the powers of his office to use taxpayer money, are you comfortable with that?
Well, I think if you saw some of the things that were done especially I'm going to talk about Amendment 4 on its own, is that the proponents of Amendment 4 lied about what the law was here in Florida. And if you watch the TV and watch the ads, you would think that abortions were not allowed, no exceptions were allowed in abortion. That was not true, that we weren't protecting the health care of mothers who had problems. And so I think it is a legitimate use of government to clarify when people are lying so blatantly that people would not seek health care coverage because they think it's illegal when it is not illegal. So I think there was a part where the Department of Health had to go out and clarify because the claims that were made were so ludicrous that people's health care was at risk and they needed to educate the public.
Even going so far as to having the Surgeon General of the Department of Health send letters to TV stations threatening criminal prosecution if they continue to run ads in support of Amendment 4. You think that was appropriate?
Well, if they're lying about what the law of the state is and confusing people and putting their health at risk, that is a legitimate use of the Surgeon General. He needs to clarify those things because we can't have people misinformed that people have put their health at risk because they're misinformed because people are trying to achieve political goals.
We'll be right back after the break. A quick note, today is the start of the Miami Book Fair, and at 3 p.m. I'll be there speaking about my new book, The Chronicles of Willie and Sal, which is a collection of stories I wrote in the 1990s about drug kingpins Willie Falcone and Sal Magutta. I'll be there with filmmakers Billy Corbin and Alfred Spellman, who created the Netflix series on Willie and Sal called The Kings of Miami. It will be a fun conversation about Miami's cocaine-fueled past. The event is free and open to the public. It is on the downtown campus of Miami-Dade College, and there will be a huge block party afterward. Come by, and just a reminder, the book fair will be going on all week. It is truly one of the best book fairs in the country and something that makes Miami special. Well, that's all the time we have. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefeaty@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you later.